All right, Tawal, welcome back.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So just a quick week recap, right? We addressed ideas or things of colonization, decolonization, and just a little bit about nationhood, and we're just talking about how it's so complex, eh?
Yeah.
But before we kind of get further into those ideas, I think it'd be I think it'd be cool to kind of just hear a bit more about your story and how you grew up, and do the same afterwards. But yeah, if you want to share those kind of things.
All right. Well, I grew up, I guess, like I would call in between the cracks. I guess because I started off as knowing myself as a Christian, specifically a Pentecostal / born again Christian. That was stemming from my paternal one, from my dad's side. I was raised by my grandmother. Well, both my grandmothers on my mom's side and on my dad's side. I guess about an equal amount of time. But the thing was, is one was a Catholic Christian, the other one was a born again Christian. So I was kind of really indoctrinated into that way of thinking and that way of believing since I was born, and constantly convinced that that was the only way for me to be. More on the born again Christian side. That experience, I guess, really provides me a more holistic understanding of what the greater struggle of Indigenous peoples are in terms of greater faith. And so I started off as a young guy in Saskatoon, going to Sunday school every Sunday, learned the gospel, read the Bible many times, and learned all of these different songs and all these different, I guess, just ways of praying. At the time felt real natural to me. And I thought that was me, and I really did have a lot of faith. And I grew up, both sides of my family, like really strong in faith. But it wasn't until I was about, I guess, 14 when I went to a sweat. Like I've been to sweats before, but not like with the intention to actually go. I was 14, I went to this elder, his name was Herb C. Sequoias Sr., and he lives right on Beardy's, and he's one of the oldest manners on the reserve now. He's in his 90s. But he ran a sweat, and it was half Christian, half Cree.
Huh.
And so, like, the very first, like, ceremony and song I've ever learned, and, like, I've kind of learned quite a few, like, as I went through the years, but the very first one I ever learned was, I had the word Jesus in there. And so my ideas and my spirituality came, like constant, conflict after conflict, when I started actually picking up the way of the sweat and the pipe. And I had a lot of internal struggle, like trying to like balance that out and seeing like, okay, well, who the hell am I? I didn't know anything about colonization at the time. I didn't go to university. I wasn't able to think for myself in that way, and to actually defend myself in my own mind, and in terms of how it relates to decolonization methods, right? And then I started sun dancing, and then that was another whole doorway into my life that I've never experienced. And started off my first year when I was 14, and right off the bat, like I had this dream. They told me like, do buffalo skulls, and yeah, I'm a Cree, right? Typically we don't do that. And I'm Cree, but I also have a lot of Assiniboine blood in me, so I knew that it could have been my ancestors like coming back and saying, "No, you come and you drag the buffalo skulls." 14-year-old me, I was scared shitless, and so I went up to one of my uncles there, and he just like looks at me, and he was like, "Don't start crying now. Don't start crying now." And he kept repeating it, and sure enough, I started crying. It was finally broke down. I was like, "I'm scared," and I was like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into." And he was like, "Yeah, you don't know what you're getting yourself into." He told me, he was like, "But right there," he was like, "you find yourself in the same shoes that all the other little boys your age are facing right now." The ones who are going to ceremony. And so then after that, completed 4 years, then I went to university. And then so another shift in my life when I went to university, started learning more and more about myself and how all of this is interrelated. Colonization, all that. And then it was a struggle. And I know, and this is where, like, I guess kind of where I want to take my life is working with those other kids who grew up with, like in Christian homes, who grew up but also want to try find, spirituality in themselves. And so that's kind of like where I fall. And that's kind of like where the kind of community I want to work with. And that's kind of like where I come from. And mind you, at the same time, at age 14, like my immediate family, they're all suffering with rank addiction. So then I left my house, went and moved with another family in the reserve, the Yapes family. And they had a sweat, but they're also like half Catholic too. So there was really a good balance there, is what I needed, right? And then they taught me their family protocols, and that's kind of where I balance my life. It's where I reference now. So that's kind of like where I come from.
So how did you work through these things? Because you said when you started to understand university, or when you got to university, you started to understand and kind of work it out for yourself. How would you say that?
It started when I realized how easy it was to lie. And lie to oneself about the reality they live in. We're constantly, and this is where I found myself, was I constantly justified why I was the way I was. Well, no, I used to say like, well, no, like, my Mushin used to tell me this and this, therefore I can do that. My Kokom used to tell me this, this, and this, therefore I can do that. Therefore, that's why I am. Because she said it. Oral history, I have to believe that. I caught myself in a system there. And I knew it was not sustainable. I couldn't live that life. So that's where the realization started happening. The turmoil in my own head. Depression came. And that's where I still find myself today when I'm dealing and talking with these kinds of things, is that constant chronic depression comes with that, hand in hand. Other people, it shows itself in anxiety. Other people lash out through addictions. Other people, I was fortunate to only be cursed with that kind of depression that came with that.
Yeah.
But you look at people like my sister, my elder sister. She's fucking genius. She's smart as hell, but she hasn't caught herself. She hasn't taken that point where this is where I used her as an example to get out of my own trauma, my own poverty. Because right away she fell to the meth crisis when she came of age, go out into her 20s, and then she fell hard to the streets. So how I got myself out of that system that kept, enabling me to be depressed and to be, to justify my trauma, to continue living in my own toxic cycles, I looked at her and I told myself I cannot end up on the streets. And it's not only her, it's like my uncles, my aunties. There's so much of them that fell to addiction. And I knew that's exactly where I was going to head. I knew for a fact, like, I have an addictive personality. So I knew that, okay, if I continue drinking, then I'm not going to stop for a while.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I had to rid out my life right away. There's other things I could rid of my life, but I'm still working on it. But again, it was like that looking back as to ones who are close to me who are suffering, because they're the ones, I guess, just like most like me. And then so I use that as a learning example to actually pull myself out of that way of thinking. And self-reflection was the biggest thing. Yeah. Self-reflection, the hugest, I couldn't stress it more, was the self-reflection, to look at myself and to try to be as honest as I could. And the thing is that it was ingrained into me since, I don't know when, that I was stupid, that I was not going to be anything more than that little fat kid that I will see myself as. It's that self-consciousness, and that really played, and it played and it festered, eh? So it was, how do I started questioning, how do I become healthy? And that's where it's like that honesty that had to come with it. And I had to acknowledge that, and I had to just accept for the fact that my parents are addicts, that they haven't done good for themselves, and that they introduced me to a life of poverty. And that was a hard pill to swallow. And then I had to realize that my grandparents were the same way. But they're older now, and they got to, play a bit with, our minds as grandchildren. And I had to admit, too, they were the same way. They did that to my parents. And my parents did that to me. So then it's a matter of looking at the system there. how do you break that, you know? So that's just kind of how I got myself out of that reflection.
Wow. Well, we'll let you reflect on that, then we'll be back.
Come back then.